Okay, so I glassed over the transom, and I wasn't going to make a video of just the lamination. There's plenty of videos out there of how to lay glass. Anyway, I did both sides with 1708, and some people might take issue with that. I was actually kind of worried because I thought when I was going to put it in the boat that this would be there'd be too much texture here, and I was wrong. This actually laid down nice and flat, and so I'm going to use thickened epoxy to laminate it to the outside skin of the boat, and that'll take up any gaps and any spaces. That'll take up any. The thickened epoxy will take up any spaces in here, but this is real. This laid down really flat. But one of the things that you have to take note of, you have to get the air bubbles out when you're putting this stuff down. And one of the biggest things, I've actually learned it before, but one of the biggest things with 1708 is you have to wet out the matte side. So you have to turn it around on whatever it is you're working on. Make sure you wet out the matte side first. Get it nice and wet the surface that you're going to put it on too with your epoxy, and then turn it around. Then turn it around and then put it down however you're going to put it down, and then start working it in. The best way to avoid air bubbles is to have this side saturated first, and it gets a little bit messy. It's not too bad, but it gets a little bit messy. Get a few strands around, but the mistake I was starting to make was all I did was wet the surface first, and I put the 1708 down, and then when I went to turn it over to the other side, the whole thing was just falling off and flapping all around, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? Because my experience with this is that it's really sticky. The epoxy was really sticky, and it just was not sticking, and so I got it off. And I turned it back over, and I wet the matte side, and then I turned it back over and I set it back down again. I started wetting it out. It went down pretty good. Another thing was I'm using pumps, but I'm also using cups. Okay, here's a measuring cup. I'd actually recommend using the measuring cup. I got all my stuff from U.S. Composites. You can get measuring cups from anywhere. You get them from Sherwin-Williams. Okay, what happened was I made a bad batch, and I started doing the other side of the transom, and it just wasn't kicking off. And I'm thinking, I know that I mixed it properly, but then I started thinking about it, and one of the pumps of the hardener, I really didn't get a full pump out of it. Okay, so if you're going to use these pumps, you got to make sure that you're getting a full pump out of each one. And all I can say is if you think you mixed up a wrong batch and you're in the middle of doing this, you're in the middle of doing this, if in doubt, throw it out. That's all I can tell you, because you're going to screw yourself, man. I mean, if you just make sure, if you think that you mixed up your epoxy wrong, if you have the slightest doubt that you made the wrong batch, just get rid of it and start over. Because that's what I had to do. I had to scrape. I had to get it off. Okay, it was just the epoxy just wasn't kicking on the one side. I scraped it all off, scraped it all the way down. I acetoned. Fortunately, it was just still wet on there. It was no big deal. But had I let that dry or got that into the boat, or if it kicked off even a little bit and was half cured, I would have had a problem. The other thing is getting air bubbles out of this is a real challenge. Okay, let me turn this over. If you're going to lay it across like this, make sure you cut this out, and cut this out too, because it does gas off a little bit, and you'll find yourself on both sides working against an air bubble in here. So cut yourself a vent, if you know what I mean. Don't just seal it up on both sides. You can if you want, you can cut it later. I'm getting ready to cut this out right now. But if you go over one side and you have a hole, if you go over one side and then you go over the other side and you just cover it over, you're gonna get like a little air pocket in here. So you got to cut yourself a vent. But anyway, the side the skin that's going to be on the that's going to glue to the transom, I went all the way around. I wrapped it, and then I cut a piece to the shape of this, and I just laminated the one side, or laminated both sides. So it came out pretty decent. It's my first time doing a transom like this, so I don't think it's too bad for a rookie. But the biggest thing is you need to get the air bubbles out. All right, and if you're not seeing the wood grain, under your laminate, you probably don't have the air bubbles out, or you probably don't have enough epoxy or resin in there, whatever it is you're using. So that's it. I'm just going to sand it down. Just got to get a few, just little boogies off of this and sand it down smooth. But this is going to go right up nice and flat up against the up against the skin. So I mean, if I do have any air bubbles in here, I'll probably just grind it down. I'll fill it in with a little bit of putty, and it's not a big deal. So that's it for now. And that came out. I'm going to weigh this thing after I cut the middles out, because I had about 19 pounds before I put the epoxy and the fiberglass on. I'm going to see what it weighs now. And like I said, the extra thickness, an extra piece of 3/4 only cost me about 9 pounds. So I am concerned a little bit about weight, but not like that. That's negligible, really. So, okay, especially with a 455 in this boat, the thing weighs probably 700 pounds. A battery that sits in the back of the boat weighs like 45 pounds. So, a 10-pound difference you're not going to notice. So, all right, that's it.